Welcome to a new session on contemporary Indian philosophy. In this session, we are going to discuss Integral Yoga by Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo's personality was multifaceted and the range of his wisdom is quite astonishing. He was a revolutionary leader, a mystic poet, and a consistent spiritualist. We remember him as a visionary humanist who insisted on the perfection of the integral personality of every individual as a precondition for the making of a perfect society. Moreover, Sri Aurobindo had developed and implemented a scheme of education to fulfill his dream of an ideal society. We adore him as a mystic of mystics, using the medium of poetry to convey his profound spiritual experience to humanity. Sri Aurobindo was active in the struggle for India's independence from the British, and he had spent a year in prison. Whilst in prison, he had a vision of the divine, which assured him that India would attain independence and that he could leave the movement to devote himself to the spiritual task. Accordingly, he retreated to the then French colony of Pondicherry and set up an ashram there. During his life in the ashram, Sri Aurobindo was actively engaged in his philosophical pursuits that had culminated in discovery of what he called Purna Yoga or Integral Yoga, the yoga of the whole being. He studied and practiced various yoga and meditation schemes to explore their practical significance for the well-being of all. Thus, Sri Aurobindo could gain a thorough understanding of the human being in its totality. He wrote in detail how one can purify his or her body and mind to gain the innate divine consciousness, usually referred to as enlightenment and liberation. Thus, Sri Aurobindo tried to explain scientifically these two loosely defined terms in the yogic systems. Integral yoga is unique with its clear explanations of the different stages of the spiritual path, its workings, abstractions and difficulties. For Sri Aurobindo, enlightenment is not the goal, but actually the beginning of another transformation of human being. We shall see the basic principles of his yoga philosophy as expounded in two of his major works. First one, Philosophy of the Life Divine. Aurobindo's The Life Divine is regarded as the greatest philosophical work of our times. The philosophy of the life divine is a philosophy of complete affirmation. It perceives the truth behind each system of philosophy, but rejects its exclusiveness. It questions the material denial of spirit, even while it affirms the reality of matter. It denies the denial of the ascetic, even when it affirms the reality of spirit. It reconciles the insistent demand of matter, life, mind and supermind in an integral harmony. Second, the Synthesis of Yoga. The Synthesis of Yoga is the second major work of Sri Aurobindo. The Life Divine is primarily a work on philosophy. Its concern is to prove to the intellect of modern humanity the possibility and inevitability of the supramental manifestation on the earth. In contrast, the Synthesis of Yoga is a scientific work that explains the scientific method to realize the potential of yoga. In this work, Aurobindo makes it clear that yoga is different from philosophy and religion. According to him, philosophy aims at discovering the highest reality. Its methods are those of critical and rational thought, but not realization. Religion aims at connecting the individual with the highest reality. Its methods include mainly creeds, rituals and ceremonies that are often supported by dogmas. Hence, Aurobindo says that the age of philosophy and religion is over, and the new age will insist on the deepest, widest and highest realization that can be attained through the methods of yoga. His vision of yoga is a methodized effort towards self-perfection by the expression of the potentialities latent in the being and the union of the human individual with the universal and transcendental existence we see partially expressed in man and in the cosmos. Next is the concept of yoga. Generally, yoga is understood in two ways. First, it means union of the individual self with the cosmic self or the absolute. When an individual is identified with Brahman or becomes one with it, he or she realizes the state of yogic bliss. In the second sense, yoga is conceived as a method, means or discipline by the practice of which salvation is attained. When the two meanings are taken together, yoga means self-realization as well as the process leading to it. Thus, the path leading to realization is a path of discipline or union. As a discipline, yoga is the synthesis of cognition, feeling and action. There are different schemes of yoga, and all of them aim at the perfection of the individual in all dimensions of being: the physical, mental, moral, social and spiritual. We shall discuss the traditional systems of yoga to show how Aurobindo had developed a unique system of yoga by synthesizing their positive aspects with the developments in the sciences of biology and physics. First one, Jnana Yoga or the path of knowledge. Jnana Yoga is the path of self-realization through discriminative knowledge. It is a form of a spiritual discipline based mainly on philosophical discrimination between the real and the unreal and the renunciation of the unreal. It is based on the realization that bondage is due to ignorance, which is the inability to distinguish between the real and the unreal. True knowledge makes us aware of the distinction between truth and untruth, spirit and matter, eternal and ephemeral, etc. Such discriminative knowledge cannot be attained merely through study or by listening to the words of a teacher, though these are also inevitable. For discriminatory knowledge, one has to meditate upon the truths learnt, and this requires concentration. Concentration is attained through the withdrawal of mind from everything that is material, and it is termed renunciation or vairagya. The Jnana Yogi lives amidst the temptations of the world, yet constantly seeks detachment and spiritual freedom. Hence, yoga is the path of the selected few who are meditative, introspective and devoted. Next is Bhakti Yoga or the path of devotion. Bhakti Yoga aims at liberation through perfect devotion to God. It requires real, genuine and ceaseless love to God to achieve perfect identity between the individual and the absolute. Bhakti Yoga is the path of systematized devotion for the attainment of union with the Absolute. Bhakti Marga is the path of pure love, where the object of love is the Supreme Being or God. Karma Yoga, or the path of action. Karma Yoga is a system of ethics and a religion intended to attain freedom through unselfishness and by good works. 2 points are emphasized in Karma Yoga. First is the value of action. It does not recommend asceticism or flying away from the world. One has to live in the world in the midst of good and evil, pleasure and pain, work and keep on working. Second, one has to work without any selfish interest, that is, with perfect detachment. Swami Vivekananda says, one must work like a master and not like a slave. Hence, Karma Yoga is the discipline of practicing detachment of the spirit while working in the world. 2 types of actions are identified: Pravritti and Nivritti. Actions which revolve around ego and attach us with the objective world are called Pravritti. The actions done in renunciation, self-denial and sacrifice are called Nivritti, that leads us to self-realization. Karma Yoga therefore teaches, do not give up the world, live in the world, imbibe its influences as much as you can, but if it be for your own enjoyment's sake, work not at all. Next is Raja Yoga, or the path of psychology. Raja Yoga is the way to realization attained by controlling mind and body by subjecting them to certain physical and mental disciplines. It is called Raja Yoga, or the king of all yoga schemes, because it is obviously the direct method aiming at realization of God. Raja Yoga is based on the presupposition that bondage is due to the distraction of body and mind by wasting the energy of the soul. The purpose of yoga is to arrest the activities of mind. Patanjali says, yoga is restraining the mind stuff from taking various forms. Next is integral yoga or Purna Yoga. Sri Aurobindo called the scheme of yoga developed by him integral yoga or Purna Yoga. By integral yoga, he proposes to bring about a synthesis not only of the major types of yoga, but all the other systems of yoga. Aurobindo feels that since the crises through which humankind is passing today are many-sided, the solution should also be many-sided and nothing short of a synthesis which brings the needed remedy. By synthesis, he does not mean a mere combination of various systems or a successive practice of each of them in turn. Aurobindo could achieve a synthesis by transcending the various forms and types of the yogic discipline and by focusing on the central principles common to all systems. The central dynamic force common to all the divergent methods is the principle and force of concentration. Integral yoga is based on the concentration of our entire conscious being on the divine, so that the divine may transform our entire being into his essential being. The process of yoga is as comprehensive as life and as integral as the totality of existence. It rises to the highest, but also brings down the power of the highest into the lowest levels of consciousness. Integral yoga aims at the conquest of the higher and higher pinnacles of consciousness and crossing beyond mind and over mind. It elevates us to the super mind. However, it is not merely the process of ascent, but also of dissent. It rests on the discovery of special methods by which the supermind can be made to permeate matters, to awaken and transform it to supramental state. In his letters on yoga, Sri Aurobindo attempts a comparison between this new supramental yoga and the traditional systems of yoga. He says that integral yoga is novel because it aims at not a departure out of world and life into heaven or nirvana, but at a change of life and existence, not as something subordinate or incidental, but as a distinct and central object. It is the descent of the new consciousness attained by the ascent that is the stamp and seal of the sadhana. Second one, the object sought after is not an individual achievement of divine realization for the sake of the individual, but something to be gained for earth consciousness, a cosmic achievement. Third, the method for total and integral change of consciousness and nature. I have not found this method as a whole or anything like it professed or realized in the old yogas, or yoga is not a retreating of old walks, but a spiritual adventure. Next is sources of influence in the development of integral yoga. Aurobindo's integral or Purna yoga has assimilated in its fold the contributions of the past system of yoga. The discovery of the supermind has already been made by the Vedic rishis, and hence Aurobindo declared that the recovery of the knowledge contained in the Vedas is indispensable if the world has to find a solution to its present problems and arrive at the next stage of its progress. He points out that the Vedas are not a closed book. The non-dogmatic and open attitude of the Vedas towards fresh experience and experimentation has opened new fields of knowledge on yoga before us. Hence, Aurobindo had attempted a synthesis of the past systems of yoga by discovering and developing new methods that he himself had proved and perfected. Integral yoga incorporates the high and profound spiritual knowledge of the Upanishads. It places the synthesis of the triple path of love, knowledge and work as expounded in the Bhagavad Gita as something central in its processes. The tantric idea of the divine perfectibility of human being is also incorporated in the synthesis of integral yoga. Some elements of Hatha yoga and Raja yoga are also assimilated into Purna yoga scheme. Aurobindo had envisioned supramental yoga as a practical means not only for the survival of humankind, but also for its fulfillment. Next is characteristics of integral yoga. The metaphysical foundation of Sri Aurobindo's yoga philosophy is his elaborate exposition of the theory of evolution. He viewed it in a new perspective and interpreted in terms of the complementary process of evolution and involution that culminates in the spiritual transformation of human being. As we could understand, the aim of yoga as a passage from the lower to the higher is twofold. One is the ordinary viewpoint that conceives the passage from the lower to the higher by the rejection of the lower and escape into the higher. Second is by the transformation of the lower into the higher. The second one is precisely the aim of integral yoga. If our aim is just an escape from the physical world into the divine world, then there is no need of a synthesis. Synthesis is required only if our aim is the transformation of our integral being into the divine existence. Then we have to pursue a method that will transform our entire being into divinely perfect being. In this process, the divine descends upon the limited and obscure human self, progressively illumines and energizes the whole lower nature and substitutes its own action. The method is a progressive surrender of the ego before the transcendental ego. It is a sadhana requiring enormous faith, absolute courage, and above all an unflinching patience. Sadhana implies 3 stages: the attempt of the ego to enter into contact with the divine, the laborious preparation of the whole lower nature to receive and become the higher nature through eventual transformation. Integral yoga aims at the total union of the individual with the absolute or divine. The self, mind, life and body of an individual are all divinized by their union with God. The lower parts do not cease to exist, but are divinely transformed. Integral thus yoga transmutes the individual into a gnostic or divine being with omniscience, omnipotence and blessedness. Sri Aurobindo envisages through integral yoga the supreme transmutation of the individual into a perfect divinized being having a godly life in this material world. Now, let us summarize what we have discussed so far. Sri Aurobindo is the greatest mystic of modern age with progressive intellect and creative imagination. As we have discussed, his mystic vision and dynamic creativity had given us a new discipline. He ventured to search for a spiritual force to attain freedom in its totality. For this, he turned to yoga and initiated momentous experiments. As a result, he realized that yoga itself should break its boundaries to deliver its unlimited power to humanity as a whole. Thus, it will provide unshakable foundations for a new world of freedom and unity. Sri Aurobindo summarized the results of all the best of the past systems of yoga and developed a new yoga called integral yoga or Purna yoga that humanity needs for its future development and fulfillment. It aims at the positive transformation of the individual's total being into a state of perfect spiritual bliss. Now, please try to work out the given assignments. First one, discuss the main themes of the life divine. Second, bring out the salient features of Aurobindo's integral philosophy. Third, bring out the characteristics of Raja Yoga. Fourth, distinguish between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Fifth, elucidate the concept of integral yoga. Now, I will suggest some books for you for further studies. Letters on Yoga, written by Sri Aurobindo, published by Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Sri Aurobindo Birth Centenary Library, Pondicherry. Second, The Life Divine, written by Sri Aurobindo, published by Indian Library Society, New York, 1965. Third, The Essentials of Aurobindo, written by Aurobindo Ghosh, edited by McDermott Robert, published by Lindisfarne Books, 2001. Fourth one, Sri Aurobindo, A Brief Biography, written by Peter Hayes, published by Oxford University Press, Delhi and New York, 1989. Fifth one, The Synthesis of Yoga, written by Aurobindo Ghosh, Centenary Edition, published by Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Pondicherry. Here are a few web links for you. First one, wikipedia.org/Sri_Aurobindo. Second, www.sriaurobindoashram.org. Third, aurosociety.org. Thank you for watching this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.